Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, FedRAMP Moderate ATO, how DNAnexus can help you pass your security audits. I'm your moderator, Bretton Pyle, and I'm excited to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Loren Buhle, DNAnexus VP of Security, Quality, and Compliance. Loren has worked in security and compliance for over 20 years, is an expert in areas of FDA/ICH, FedRAMP, and FISMA compliance, and also works with our customer security auditors. He also led the project to achieve our FedRAMP Moderate ATO, which he'll talk about a bit more in the webinar. We encourage your active participation today, and we want to hear from you directly. So if you have any questions at any point during the webinar, please raise your hand, and then I will allow you access to your microphone so you can ask Loren your question directly. If you do not have access to a microphone, you can also use the chat or Q&A icon next to the raise your hand icon in the bottom of your Zoom window. Also, this webinar is being recorded today. So if you have any qualms about being recorded, we can always send this to you afterwards in an email. For everybody else, the recording will be sent out in the next couple of days, so make sure to keep an eye on your inbox. Without further ado, I will now hand it over to Loren to kick it off.
So good morning and good afternoon to all the attendees. This is Dr. Loren Buhle, and I'm delighted to share our FedRAMP journey with you and how it can help you achieve your security, quality, and compliance audits. So with that said, a huge achievement for DNAnexus was getting the FedRAMP authorization for Moderate from the Health and Human Services. This is quite a multi-year journey and actually changed our organization quite a bit. And I think the value that the DNAnexus FedRAMP ATO brings a lot to our customers. And I wanted to help explain how that brings value to each of you. So with that, I'm going to first go into what is a reminder of what is FedRAMP, what is the Moderate, why do you care, that type of thing. So FedRAMP stands for Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program. So it was originally part of a procurement program, so there'd be a standard for federal organizations to say, how do I evaluate a cloud provider? So that they have a common set of standards, and it was used around procurement. The FedRAMP authorization is like a seal of approval that you're good to contract with this, but it also held a fairly high bar. And it was 3 bars. They're from fairly low, moderate, which is what we aim for, and high, which is for super secure. The main alignment on the standards was NIST 800-53R4, which is a internationally known standard. There's several others, such as the FIPS area, and some are on the boundaries, as well as other NIST documents. But let's look at some of the control families. So if you're in the business of security or quality or compliance, these are some of the standards that come from the NIST 800-53. So there's access control. This is who can log in, what's the length of the password, all that kind of stuff. As well as contingency planning, this disaster recovery, how do you manage configurations, all the standard blocking and tackling you would expect to have. And this is known how you do it. NIST is very prescriptive. Some of the ICH and ISO requirements are more visionary, but NIST is, this is how you're going to do it. So our passwords have to be 12 characters or more. You can't reuse a password for 24 generations. It's very, very prescriptive. So this is the FedRAMP program that initially started with a procurement effort for the federal government, but was widely recognized as a good program to go forward with procurement, as well as to use for your own audits. There's not a lot of people that have FedRAMP authorization or ATO. In fact, as of yesterday, there's only 125. We were the 124th in the world. 125th was GitHub. We are the only platform, the only genomics platform that's recognized with a federal FedRAMP ATO of any kind. So this is quite an accomplishment. So 125, they're done. 62 are in process, and 14 have initial that they want to go in this multi-year $1 million plus business of getting their authorization. And indeed, here is, and you'll see the URL at the bottom on the www.fedramp.gov website. These are the services that the federal government recognizes having an ATO. So this is that final seal of we're approved, we have our documentation in order, we are audited by a third-party auditor. So just don't take my word for it or the agency's word for it, but the third party stands by us every month to make sure that what we say is truthful and they have verified everything we say. So it's a very rigorous process. In fact, it's a rigorous process that a lot of our customers have recognized. They prefer this moderate ATO over a SOC 2 and some of the other SAS 70s and things like that that used to be around in the past. This is a much higher standard. However, just filing the documentation is not what's out there. There's a whole lot more. So the authority to operate is the initial documentation. It's about 50% engineering. In other words, things actually change quite substantially to achieve this ATO. And there's a lot of process change. So things that would be fine to do, but they didn't measure to the security standard of FedRAMP, they had to change. We had to stop using certain things. We had to change our processes to accommodate the much more rigorous standards of NIST. We had third-party auditors. We meet with the agencies or the joint agency board, that's the JAB, on a monthly basis. And there are thousands of pages of documentation that go with this that are continually updated. But more importantly, there's a concept of not just do it once and then be recertified every year like you would a SOC 2. This is continuous monitoring. So we monitor on a daily, weekly, and monthly with processes. And the feds are good about evolving the requirements. So what passed in June or August, the bar changes. And so there's continuous change in terms of the requirements. Now, DNAnexus, as you're probably aware, does weekly updates on its platform. And so there's a concept of, does that change the certification? How are you managing your risks? Have you identified them? How have you managed them? And in certain cases, we're managing better and better with better solutions. So these are significant changes that we have to file with Health and Human Services, our sponsor, to say, is this okay? We think we're reducing the risk from not just acceptable to even better, as well as the market changes, as our security posture changes, we have to adapt. So it's a continuous process. It's not one and done. It continues on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. And we report out to Health and Human Services at least once a month, if not more frequently. What does this really mean? What this means is that FedRAMP, in building for FedRAMP, we had to change how we built things. We didn't build them and then certify them after the fact. We built in security from the very beginning, from the very base. So we had to throw out some of the stuff that we had prior to FedRAMP and start over again. And that's what I like to call security by design. In terms of thinking, oh my God, I can't do anything in this highly secure environment, that's not the concept that we had. It really was to provide guardrails, and there's a picture of a guardrail there to keep you in a safe area. So the design is secure, the security is built in. You can't get there from here. There's minimalist security so that if you only get the security you need to have to get the job done, doesn't get in your way unless you're trying to do something you really shouldn't be doing. So it's in the design, it's in the implementation and the day-to-day operation all the way through. So we take that concept of guardrails. Guardrails end up being a forcing function so that if people try to do things they're not supposed to do, or perhaps they do accidentally, they may collaborate with people they're not supposed to collaborate, or data may leak to places they're not supposed to be. These guardrails or forcing functions prevent that. And all actions are audited, because oftentimes it's not a security issue, it was a mistake, or something went awry. And the fact that we have these guardrails keeps our users, keeps our developers true to what needs to be doing. It also makes for a much more reliable operation of controls in terms of, as we put the controls out there, we know they're working because we're monitoring them continuously. The auditing, as I mentioned, is all done in real time. Yes, we can do retrospective for baselining and things like that, but everything we do is audited, and there's part of the evidence that we share with our auditors, with the feds, with your auditors, should they need to see it. And so as we develop our policies, I'm sure most of you have SOPs, policies, and procedures. These are implemented into processes that are part of our security controls and our methods, so that at any given point, we can produce the evidence. So the results. So after we've done all this, what do we have? We have a highly automated environment for security, assurance, governance, and compliance. So I want to emphasize the fact it's automated. We don't have tens of thousands of people running the construction and the controls. We just have a handful, and we've automated a lot so that there are continual security canaries. There's always monitoring at every given point, maybe not necessarily for security, but to say, is everything happening as we expect? If there's a change, what is the change? And we're alerted and can respond to it or become proactive. It also provides a reliable implementation of the documents that are out there, the policies and procedures, the service level agreements we signed with each of you. How do we know if we're in compliance? By being able to continuously monitor, are we within the thresholds of where we should be for security, for performance, or for whatever's out there, because we have it by design. It's set there, not measured after the fact. It's built in from the beginning. An interesting aspect or result on my side is a lot of you will come to us because you have supplier audits and you'll audit us, or your customers will ask for audit material, and they will come to us for, can you give us evidence? Well, we can give you evidence at any point in time because we just take a snapshot, or if you need a continuous feed, we can provide that as well, because that's set up by the framework. It's not a Herculean task to go out and fetch it, spend 2 weeks grabbing this data. We have it flowing anyway, and we're paying attention to it. So that's the model that FedRAMP guardrails push us towards, and that works particularly well as we're growing. So in essence, the final part of the security design is we have a functional and reliable model for governance, so that what we do is secure and predictable, so that you can do your science and realize it is secure. If there's something happening, we're paying attention. DNAnexus is paying attention. Your security people have access to me so that you can get all this material as you need it. If there are incidents on your side, we are part of that response if it involves our platform. And so a lot of the things that came out of FedRAMP have a benefit directly to you and to how you pass your audits. So in terms of our federal or federally funded users, and these are people that federal government themselves, or if there are grants given from NIH or NCI, they may require a FISMA certification. And so there's some immediate benefits, one of which is that if you build on the DNAnexus platform, such as precision medicine is indeed done that way, you can inherit the control. So for the Precision FDA, when you log in, you actually log in through the authentication system of DNAnexus. So when the authentication, the login is set on Precision FDA, it's merely a pass-through. So it's much more efficient in terms of building it because you don't have to do it. You just leverage the underlying platform that's FedRAMP. And the controls and the security and the third-party audit adherence is done already for you because you inherited that control. If you do extra work on top of it, then you do need to review and audit that material. But as much as you can inherit the FedRAMP underpinnings, it makes it a whole lot easier for whatever you build on top of it. In addition, there's the standardized controls because FISMA is based on the same NIST 800-53 revision 4. There are fewer controls, but in fact, there's more in the FedRAMP side, but they can inherit, and we know what access controls are. We know exactly what the risk profiles are. The security processes are very, very similar. And in our case, we've automated a lot. So the documentation exercise, even though it's thousands of pages, is now fully automated. So for federally and federally funded users, it's a bit of a slam dunk. And that was the original reason to have FedRAMP, so to make it much more uniform, cost-effective, and efficient to use a FedRAMP ATO'd third party. However, if you're not FedRAMP or you're not federal, there are a lot of benefits that we have helped our customers realize in the past months as we've gone through the FedRAMP process, and that is the NIST 800-53 revision 4 is internationally recognized. I mentioned it's very prescriptive. So in other words, there's not a lot of wiggle room in terms of, do I really want two-factor? Well, NIST 800-53 says, yes, you will have it. And then these are the different ways you're going to use it as you go from moderate to high. But it sets a fairly high bar for security. So several of our customers said, Don't need a SOC 2 if you have the FedRAMP. It also allows our customers to inherit a lot of the security that the Health and Human Services has approved, allowing them to focus on the science. So it provides a really strong foundation for your audits by leveraging our FedRAMP certification. It also provides a really good foundation for other regulatory requirements that are related to security, but they're not directly security. Things like privacy. So as GDPR came in for our European customers, it wasn't a big effort on our part for the data processing component of GDPR. Same thing with HIPAA. In fact, it was a little bit overkill for HIPAA. So the foundation, as well as the ability to leverage the FedRAMP documents, meant it a lot less work for us as the new requirements came in. And the last point is something that is a strategy that DNAnexus uses, and that is to future-proof some of our security and compliance as we move forward. If you read in today's news, there is a senator who's who just put out a bill for privacy, and if privacy on U.S. data, and if CEOs violate that privacy and sell data and don't notify people in time, they may go to jail. So how would that impact the DNAnexus profile? Actually, not much at all. We've got those controls in already, and we can prove how we manage your privacy of your data. So using this strong foundation from FedRAMP allows us to future-proof it. Now let's look at that holistic approach that I just mentioned. So in the Venn diagram I have on the left side of the slide, the blue box for security, or the blue oval, yes, we're ISO 27001, which is more, it is a very solid security standard, but it is not specific. FedRAMP based on this is extremely prescriptive. When you overlap that with some of the HIPAA and GDPR or local laws, that's in compliance, there's a significant area of overlap. If you also look at some of our customers that are regulated, say by the FDA or the ICH or various other agencies, by CAP and CLIA, there's a lot of common themes. So some of the common themes are who did what, who's allowed to see what, who can read which files for privacy, who's allowed to modify the privacy, the records, et cetera, who can share which documents, the track and trace of who touched what, where did it go, where's the audit trails. It may have come from security, but it's often used by quality, it's often used by compliance. So as new regulations come in, we look at them, we say, have we already covered this? Is there an additional report we might have to generate? And more often than not, we've already covered much, if not all of it already, so that when someone says, how do we know you're compliant with PIPTA, the Canadian equivalent of HIPAA, we can map that directly to the controls, the FedRAMP controls and some of the other controls, by using the concept of holistic compliance in this Venn diagram. So this helps future-proof us. So as new regulations come in, it's a fairly straightforward exercise to say, what would change? Usually the answer is not a whole lot. It's maybe some additional reports that have to be generated, but there's not a whole lot of change. And our customers often come to us and bring us new regulations, some Australian privacy regulations, and we would map them against this holistic approach and say, let's understand it and figure out, how are we managing the risks appropriately? What are the control points? How do we report out so your audits go well? So let's look a little bit under the hood in terms of how we manage software at DNAnexus. So we mentioned we do a lot of software development for the base platform and on the applications collaboratively. So some of you are our partners, and so we use GitHub to facilitate collaboration. The fact that GitHub now became FedRAMP makes it even nicer. So they are now part of our FedRAMP boundary. We do Agile Scrum with security built in. So we have security checks using Fortify and SNCC. As well as the OWASP security scans, as well as quality scans throughout, fully documented, fully automated. So this allows us to do our merging of branches once a week. We have updates to our platform weekly. And so being able to cycle through on a solid FedRAMP foundation is a huge boon. Yes, it was difficult to set up. We had to do a lot of changes, but once we got there and we built it on efficiency, it really scales to the demands of our customers. Security built in so that as a developer, before they even merge a branch, they go through multiple security scans in terms of what's out there, what are the underlying libraries. We had recently a requirement to survey all of our open source software to understand which ones are permissive, viral, highly viral, ephemeral. Well, it turns out that was not that much work because it came out of the security scans. They would scan what libraries, what are they secure? And by the way, what type of library is out there? So this was a future-proof just for open source software in terms of how, as we go forward, how do we scale? It's already built into the foundation. We have about 2,000 to 3,000 test scripts that we run just of our customers out of the 8,000 in the total test bundle, and they are run several times a week, fully automated. Vulnerability testing is done every week. We report it out monthly. And when you think about vulnerabilities, they're coming in from some of the open source. If you think about Ubuntu and Red Hat, these vulnerabilities occur all the time. And so understanding what they are, addressing them as they come up is something that's actively done. Just because it was secure 2 weeks ago doesn't mean it's still secure. Things evolve continually. And so this continuous monitoring and continuous patching, fixing, replacement of software is something we do every week. For those working in a regulated space and reporting out to the FDA or to the European authorities or Japanese authorities, the system is 21 CFR Part 11 compliant, therefore it needs to be computer system validated. So we have a GXP offering that is in addition to our existing secure platform where we give release notes of what's changing. Our customers can do their own testing, and we fully validate the system every Tuesday, every time there is an update. So this is for people who are used to doing 1 or 2 releases a year. We do it on a weekly basis and make sure that all the changes, security, patching, the refactoring of code is checked every week in a fully automated fashion. And indeed, going from GitHub to our staging environment to production, this is something that happens like an assembly line. And the FedRAMP mentality, the framework by NIST 800-53, gives us that secure, future-proof environment to go forward. Now, I made mention of FISMA. So what's the difference between FedRAMP and FISMA? And by the way, can you have both? Well, the answer is yes, you can have both, but there is a significant difference. But before we get to the differences, I wanted to talk about the similarities. Both came from the federal government in terms of procuring services. Some, it can come from direct funding, such as Precision FDA. Others could be for indirect funding, such as all of us from the NIH. They follow pretty much the same standards, and they both award an ATO for 3 years, and they have monthly updates for the continuous monitoring, or the CONMON, and as well as the plan of action, the POEM. So there are some similarities, but there are also some differences. And so when we talked about NIST 800-53, here are the moderate controls. Now, just because there's 261 and 326, each control has maybe 15 parts to it. So when we look at FedRAMP Moderate, that's actually about 1,600 controls, because each control, the 326, has multiple pieces. So this makes one of the documents well over 700 pages. So in general, FISMA has slightly fewer controls than FedRAMP, and this makes sense because the cloud has not as distinct edges. FISMA is also an older regulation. It came out in 2002. FedRAMP came out in 2012. So there is a little bit of difference that FedRAMP has a slightly higher bar. But when you think of, can I put a FISMA on top of FedRAMP? Absolutely. Other differences. FedRAMP is do it once and use it many times. The sponsor can be either an agency or a joint agency. Oops, sorry. It is for cloud only. It must have a third-party independent assessor. So this is an organization that is trained to do FedRAMP. That's what they do. And so it is easy to compare one FedRAMP with another. And indeed, the templates and the filing and all the documentation, including the DNAnexus documentation, is available on max.gov, run by the federal GSA. FISMA is focused on an individual system. So if you do it once for one project, you've done it once for one project. If you have another project, you have to do it again. The sponsor is the funding agency. So if the NIH does a FISMA for one project A and they do another one for project B, you have to do it twice. And just because you do it for one NIH agency, and then you do it for a VA, the paperwork may be somewhat different, though it is following the same implementation, same NIST standard. It doesn't matter whether it's on-premise or in cloud. So this is an older one. In 2002, there wasn't a lot of cloud work. The sponsor performs the assessment. So the NIH performs the assessment, or the VA performs the assessment, which means that it depends upon the assessor versus the PAO, the third-party assessor. For FedRAMP, it's the same. And speaking to another FedRAMP company, you can really know where you are and exactly what the attitude is. And as FedRAMP changes, we all go through the same changes, not so much with the FISMA. Now, what is different and what's very advantageous with FISMA is they can reference FedRAMP. So as I mentioned, Precision FDA is FISMA certified, or will be shortly, and they leverage the FedRAMP. So they don't have to build some things, and they just inherit the controls. And when you can inherit it, the FISMA compliance on those particular controls, you don't have to do much of anything. So that's part of the differences. And this is an illustration of the FedRAMP. Once you are FedRAMP, the different agencies recognize it. So it's a one-to-many, versus FISMA is, if you've done it once, you've done it once, and you probably have to do it over again for a different agency. So they are, for the federal audience, FedRAMP is very good to have. There's more and more of them. We're at 125 FedRAMP products out there, and this is a benefit. Compliance and DNAnexus. One of the things that's really important, and I have conversations with our customers, is understanding who is responsible for what. And so on the right side is what I'm going to say the layer cake of responsibility. So CSP at the bottom, that's the cloud service provider, has responsibilities. So our cloud service providers are Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure. And so they will have responsibilities for things like physical security. When you think about it, does DNAnexus have a data center? No, we use the cloud service provider. So physical security is their responsibility that we inherit. So just like I mentioned, FISMA inherits controls from FedRAMP, a FedRAMP can inherit controls from another FedRAMP. And that's really important. We don't have to have physical guards out there. When you have questions about what is the hurricane-proof ability or tornado on your physical data center, that's something we refer to our cloud service providers. They're the ones that were audited. It's sufficient for them. So we can inherit that. Just as when you are asked in your audits about the physical security of the cloud, you inherit it from DNAnexus, who inherits it from Amazon Web Service or Microsoft Azure. So that's the idea of the inheritance. In the middle of that figure, in the blue area, and actually gray area, is the area that DNAnexus brings to the table. Things like complete encryption of the data in transit and at rest. The fact that when you upload data, it's immutable for once it lands on the on DNAnexus platform. We check to make sure it was updated with integrity, and it's immutable. You can't modify it except for delete it. We have the complete chain of provenance. Where did it come from? Where did it go? Full audit trail, etc. And we have the certifications, FedRAMP, ISO, compliance with the local laws, GDPR, etc., and the various quality. Where the responsibility for our customers is in the CAP CLIA. You can utilize this, but we are not a lab ourselves. You are the lab, and so you still have those responsibilities. If you are validating the end user of a pipeline, we can help qualify it, and while we validate the platform, your particular applications and pipelines have to be owned. We can help you get there, but you still need to own that. So this gives an overview of who's responsible for what. So how does this help you with your audits? Well, first of all, is if you're using our platform, it's very likely you can inherit some of the pre-existing controls that are already audited. And so this is, for Precision FDA, this was a slam dunk for logging in and using our services. If you have a single sign-on or want the authentication and make sure you have high quality that matches your auditors we can just refer you to, this is how we do with it with NIST 800-53 in the FedRAMP. And in general, that is just fine. So the inheritance is probably one of the fastest. It's out there, it's already audited. Here's the evidence we provide. And so that makes it very easy for an audit. An additional one is traceability of your audit requirements to evidence from DNAnexus. So some of your requirements will go straight to DNAnexus. And a trivial one is recovery times, objectives and recovery point objectives, all your disaster recovery. This goes straight to our platform so we can trace directly to what we have. I go through 2 or 3 audits a week. So it's very standard for us, and we can either take a snapshot in time or continuous feed or something like that, whatever it takes for your auditors to feel that the risks are understood and managed to the level that you need is something we work with. So the traceability is something that comes naturally out of the platform, as well as the future proof, which it doesn't usually come up in an audit, but there are regulations that are evolving. So even the existing regulations, how they're enforced or not enforced, does change over time. And we found that it's a mistake to have an initiative or a project around every regulation that pops up, because you could, by following one regulation, contradict another regulation. But by the holistic or future-proof approach that DNAnexus uses, and that's the Venn diagram, yes, we can point out the exceptions, and there aren't a whole lot of them, but we can also say, when this regulation comes, what's the impact on you? What needs to change? What do we stop doing? What do we start doing? Does it have any impact at all? How would I do that? And all you have to have is a discussion, and DNAnexus has already had a lot of these discussions in terms of this is how we think things will change. It's usually around additional reporting, which is not a big thing because we report out quite a bit anyway. And this is my last slide, so I'm going to pause a bit. And these are some of the questions that I get asked a lot of: how long did it take? What was the cost? It took about 2 years. This was not a trivial endeavor. It cost several $1 million to stand it up, and probably a fraction of that to sustain it, but it's not a one and done. It's a continuous process. And then after 3 years, you start again. And the documentations, the thousands of pages are written. We keep them up to date. Some of you have access to these. We provide this documentation to you. We generally like to explain it instead of handing you 700 pages for one document. Second question is, with the FedRAMP ATO, what did we stop doing? Well, there were some very good pieces of technology we no longer could use. So when we would do our vendor assessment, we didn't necessarily know who had access to the data that was being used. If we couldn't answer the question, we couldn't use the system. Some were hosted in clouds, but they weren't FedRAMP clouds, so we had to bring them in-house. So Atlassian's Jira, we brought in-house. Some of the other tools that you may be using, we could not use in the typical cloud because we could not ensure the quality of the security. So there were quite a few things that we stopped using, and we started using other vendors. What parts of the DNA platform are within the FedRAMP boundary? So currently, this initial ATO focuses on Amazon Web Services in Amazon East and West only. So we do have Amazon Web Services in Sydney, Frankfurt, China. We have Microsoft services in West. We have Microsoft services in Amsterdam and in other locations. They are currently outside the FedRAMP boundary. So because we're FedRAMP, it's not all of us, not everywhere, at least not yet, but one step at a time. How did DNAnexus security stance change with FedRAMP? I would say in a very, very major way. So lots and lots of training, building security by design. We have extensive phishing tests and pen testing. A lot of equipment gets examined. We no longer support remote media or portable media. So some customers used to ship us their terabytes of data on the latest Best Buy removable media. We no longer accept media because it was a security risk. We couldn't get the chain of provenance. There were lots and lots of concerns. So it was a big cultural change as well as a significant process and technology change. How did FedRAMP ATO help with GDPR audits, SOC 2 audits? Well, for SOC 2, we in essence replaced them. We don't have a SOC 2 because we feel the FedRAMP ATO is much more substantial and addresses a lot of the security concerns in a way the SOC 2 doesn't really give service to. In terms of GDPR, we have, that's still very, very new. We get examined quite extensively as a data processor, and having the level of controls, while security and privacy are related, you can be secure but not private. We realize that, but a lot of the track and trace that comes from our compliance side made it a lot easier. And so we could also understand who has what access to the data, and that comes from our security side. So having this FedRAMP future-proofed infrastructure made it a whole lot easier to deal with a fairly substantial privacy regulation. So put us in a very good place, but more importantly, it put you, the customer, the user, in a much better place to do your science. A very rigorous framework and underpinning to help you be successful and your audits to go fairly quickly. And know that our documents are also audited by a third-party assessor and Health and Human Services.
Thank you, Loren, for your presentation. If you have any further questions, you can always reach out to us. You can send an email to info@DNAnexus.com, and we can respond to you with answers to those. As a reminder, the webinar is recorded, so again, keep an eye on your inbox for the recording in the next couple days. I'd like to thank Dr. Loren Buhle again for the webinar today, and I hope everyone has a good rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.